Welcome back. It's time to get into our next art historical style, and that is called realism, with a capital R. It's a proper noun. What we find with realism is that the pendulum is swinging away from those sort of intangibles, the feelings, the emotions, the myriad of responses that Romanticism, the goal of Romantic period artists, were trying to evoke from you, the viewer, whether it was tapping into, the dream world or current events, or using landscape to tap into transcendental spiritual thinking. That body of work continues to be produced, but then we have an interest back into some of the tenets of the Enlightenment, that other philosophy of the age, like Romanticism. We talked a little bit about the Enlightenment associated with the work of Canaletto and his Grand Tour paintings. Remember the whole idea of, you want to learn about something, again, more of the rational, conscious mind, the era where if you want to learn about something, you conduct an experiment about it, or you go bear witness to it by going to it and studying it. Principles of the Enlightenment, coalesce with the march of the scientific world and all the myriad of disciplines within that umbrella of science, as it's advancing, also with, the march of the Industrial Revolution. But, keep in mind it's more grounded in the rational mind versus the irrational or subconscious mind, as we've learned through Romanticism. Let me show you a chart. We'll get to our PowerPoint here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Minimizing my view here. This is our first artist, but let me back up a slide here, and before we get into this painting here, so we can see what I'm talking about here. So I've kind of created just a basic little compare and contrast two columns here. A lot of this here you've already been introduced to. Romanticism, as I just summed up, again, grounded more in the subconscious, the imagination. The goal, of course, is to tap into one's feelings, evoke a response from the viewer, the audience that these artworks are being produced for. So they could be awe-inspiring or terrorizing, or maybe there is a social consciousness message being communicated to the viewer, social inequities, abuse of peoples, that kind of thing. We saw that in the work of Turner, in the work of Goya, that kind of thing. All right. Realism, though. Pendulum swinging back to the Enlightenment. Again, more of a rational, direct pursuit of knowledge. In a way, it's sort of like humanism a little bit, without the throwback to the classical world, but the idea of, the cultivation of the self, of the rational mind, through empirical approaches to learning, direct observation, experience. And the one thing to keep in mind is, it's a realist work of art, or an example of the art historical period of realism, if their subjects come from their own contemporary world, observable subjects, things they can go see and bear witness to. Keep in mind, the realists are not going to ever paint, the dream they had last night. They're never going to paint some kind of scenario from the imagination, like an imagined, biblical scene, like Titian's Assumption of the Virgin, right? They're not going to paint mythological scenes, deep history scenes, like even what Jacques-Louis David did with neoclassicism. The realists are going to put on the brakes and say, no, this subject demands too much of our imagination. We can't study it. We can't see it. Therefore, we're axing it. We draw from our own lives and our own contemporary subjects. So, with that said, let's meet the father of realism, Gustave Courbet. This painting is called The Stonebreakers from 1849. And he was a French realist painter. Below here, let me get my little image of myself to disappear here for a second, so you can read that quote with me. It something the artist famously said, which really underscores the whole philosophy of realism in the art world, and that is, I have never seen an angel. Show me an angel and I'll paint one. Meaning, you know, his dedication is to subjects he can see with his own eyes. He's not going to imagine, you know, what an angel looks like so many artists of the Renaissance did, right? He is going to draw from his own world, and that's what you see in this particular painting here. I'll come back now. All right, the Stonebreakers. Well, that is a job in the 19th century. Probably something that existed in the 20th as well. This is the lowest rung kind of work. It's work though, but can you imagine showing up day after day, month after month, and probably year after year, where your job is to extract stone from the earth and break it into rubble, into smaller bits for myriad, probably agricultural and construction projects. That's what you see Courbet depicting as the subject of his painting, with two figures occupying the immediate foreground. So we have that connection, that relationship to them, yet we can't see their faces. And that is something that Courbet made a choice not to show us, whereas maybe in the Baroque period we may have some, melodramatic, facial expressions communicating how they feel or the difficulty of the work. Instead, Courbet uses their body language to do just that. Stooped positions, bent over, pounding and hauling rubble. Look at their clothing. This is not a job that pays well. Tattered vest on the older man on the right. The young boy, and again, children were, put to work as soon as they had strength and ability to do so in the old days. You can see the torn shirt here, just a single suspender strap holding up his pants. So, a humble lunch in the back right-hand corner here. So with a palette that's just made up of basic browns and tans, that communicates a humbleness, a lower, economic level. This is not, the palette of, sumptuous Rococo paintings or English grand manner portrait art. This is, an unglamorous world, and it's a true world. This is a realist painting. This is Courbet pulling the veil and depicting a subject in an unromanticized way, meaning he is not trying to give you a view of something charming or meant to entertain you or delight you. He is showing you the a real view into the lives of the French country poor, while at the same time, choosing to shoot two men of different ages. We have the young boy on the left, and this is an older man on the right. So it's as if Courbet is suggesting to the viewer a timeline moving from left to right, that this old man was once this young boy, and how you can spend a lifetime at such mind-numbing, physically demanding work for little reward, little recognition, and little escape into better job prospects. This is an era of labor revolts. We've talked about all the revolutions happening, but this is an era in the 19th century as well, where people of different labor groups are starting to take a stand for themselves and rise up, and artists are right along with them, not afraid to expose unpopular subjects, particularly when in France there's still a king, a monarchy, right, who is checked out and not nearly as broad-minded enough to think about the lives of all French citizens at this time. All right, let's meet our second realist artist, and this is Millet. Millet with a painting called The Gleaners from 1857. Very similar. Figures in the foreground, three women in a landscape country setting. I have to admit, when I first saw this painting, I thought it was very charming. There's a little bit, if you can see it in person, there's a little bit of a blush to the sky. And then there's this beautiful kind of golden lighting that illuminates the scene with long, kind of late afternoon shadows, almost golden hour. Neatly shorn agricultural fields as if a harvest has just taken place. You can see tidy, bundles of hay or wheat or whatever grain they're growing being prepared for sale. So it's deceptive. You think it's something called a pastoral painting. A painting that's a slice of country life that's meant to convey beauty and charm. No. The 19th century viewer would read the title and then go, oh, I see what's going on here. It's a word we don't really use too often anymore in our modern lives, but to glean is when the wealthy landowner would invite the laborers, the people who are running, the fields and harvesting and doing all the hard work. They're invited back to glean or collect the scraps after the harvest has already happened and that landowner has already profited, right? So what you find here in the immediate foreground, again, so that we have this connection to these three women, are three individuals bent over. Like Courbet, Millet doesn't focus on the faces. He's using body language to communicate the status of their lives, the hard, difficult lives these three women experience in the French countryside. Millet, a French country boy himself. These are his people. He grew up in that world. So it is a realist painting for his connection to his subject. Looking at them, you see very similar to the Stonebreakers, bent, stooped postures. A little closer view would show you kind of gnarled hands, workers' hands. These are not, privileged ladies, again, to refer to Rococo art, but, dainty white hands and gloves. No, these are hands that do work, bodies that are often bent in physically demanding, mind-numbing labor. So once again, the goal with both artists is to evoke sympathy from the viewer, to expose a reality that people ignore in their day-to-day lives, and to bring a sympathetic light to the hard-working poor of the French countryside, and doing it through an observable contemporary subject. Therefore, both of these artists, Courbet and Millet, are examples of artists associated with the art historical movement called Realism. Thanks very much. See you in a little bit for another lecture.